You want applause. You want recognition. You want people to congratulate you on your efforts, acknowledge your struggle, and validate your progress. And that desire is destroying your success. Because the moment you need an audience to keep going, you have made your progress dependent on external factors that you cannot control. The most powerful work you will ever do happens in private, in silence, in the dark, where no one is watching and no one is applauding. The person who can perform in the dark, who can keep up the effort even without any recognition, who can build without publicizing, that person is unstoppable. That person succeeds while others wait for validation and praise. This audiobook will teach you how to become that person, to work when no one is watching, to keep going even when no one recognizes you, to build in the dark until your results speak so loudly that recognition becomes irrelevant. Chapter 1. The spotlight is a trap. You want to be seen. You want people to notice your effort. You want an audience watching as you build, as you struggle, as you progress toward your goals. And this one is destroying everything you're trying to create. Because the moment you need visibility to continue, you have handed control of your success to forces you cannot control. The spotlight feels like fuel. The spotlight feels like motivation. But the spotlight is a trap, and you have walked into it willingly, eagerly, without recognizing that it is slowly starving everything that actually matters. Here is what you need to understand. Most people have become addicted to being seen. They cannot work without announcing, cannot progress without sharing, cannot achieve without an audience validating every single step. This is not a minor preference. This is addiction. Full, complete, destructive addiction that operates with the same mechanics as any substance dependency. The visibility provides a hit. The hit feels good. The hit must be repeated. And without the hit, nothing happens. No work, no progress, no building, just waiting for the next opportunity to be seen. That is the key. The spotlight feeds ego while starving results. Every moment spent seeking visibility is a moment not spent building. Every energy unit directed toward being seen is an energy unit not directed toward becoming capable. Every concern about whether others are watching is a concern that displaces focus on whether you are actually improving. The spotlight demands attention, and the attention it demands is attention stolen from the work itself. Think about your own behavior. When did you last work on something important without telling anyone? When did you last make progress without posting about it? When did you last achieve something and simply let the achievement exist without broadcasting it to the world? If you struggle to answer these questions, you have a visibility addiction. You have confused being seen with making progress. You have made the spotlight a requirement rather than an occasional byproduct. You have a choice. Continue needing the spotlight and remain trapped by its demands, or learn to operate in the dark where real work actually happens. One path keeps you performing. The other path makes you productive. One path creates dependency. The other path creates freedom. The trap is real, but you can escape it if you recognize it for what it is. Here is how visibility destroys momentum. When you work for recognition, you stop when recognition does not come. This is the fundamental vulnerability of spotlight addiction. Your motivation is not internal. Your motivation is external. And external motivation is unreliable. It comes when others decide to provide it. It disappears when others lose interest. You have no control over it, yet you have made it the engine of your progress. Consider the content creator who quits when views drop. They were working. They were building. They were producing content consistently. But the views declined. The recognition faded. The spotlight dimmed. And suddenly, the work stopped. Not because the work was no longer valuable. Not because the skills were no longer developing. Not because the path was no longer valid. Simply because the audience shrunk. The visibility decreased. And without visibility, the creator discovered they had no internal engine to sustain the effort. Consider the entrepreneur who abandons projects that do not generate immediate attention. They have an idea. They start building, but nobody notices. Nobody celebrates the beginning. Nobody validates the early effort. And so the project dies. Not because it was a bad idea, not because it could not have succeeded, because the spotlight did not arrive quickly enough, because the entrepreneur needed to be seen building more than they needed to actually build. That is the key. Every dependency on being watched creates a vulnerability that private workers do not have. The person who can work without witnesses cannot be stopped by the absence of witnesses. The person who can build without recognition cannot be derailed by the absence of recognition. They have internal fuel. They have private engines. They have something the visibility-addicted person lacks entirely. Independence. It is not about never being seen. It is not about hiding forever. It is about being able to work regardless of whether anyone is watching. About having the capacity to operate in complete darkness if darkness is what the situation requires. About not needing the spotlight to continue. That capacity is freedom. That capacity is power. That capacity is what separates those who eventually succeed from those who only succeed when conditions are perfect and audiences are present. Here is the truth about the dark. Operating in the dark is not a limitation. It is a competitive advantage. While others wait for audiences, you could be building. While others need validation to continue, you could be progressing. While others stop because no one is watching, you can be advancing toward goals they will never reach because they could not tolerate the invisibility required to reach them. Most people cannot operate in the dark. Most people need the spotlight so badly that they sacrifice everything to maintain it. They announce projects they never finish because the announcement provided enough visibility to satisfy the addiction temporarily. They share beginnings that never become endings because beginnings get attention and endings require dark, unseen work to achieve. They perform progress without making progress because performance is visible and real progress often is not. You have a choice. Be one of the many who needs the spotlight, or be one of the few who can thrive without it. The math is simple. If most people cannot operate in the dark, then operating in the dark automatically places you in a smaller, more capable group. Your willingness to be unseen becomes itself a filter that separates you from the majority who require constant visibility. Here is what the spotlight actually costs you. It costs you depth. When you work for visibility, you work at the surface. You do what can be seen. You focus on what can be displayed. But the deepest work, the most transformative development, the foundational building that real success requires, none of that is visible. None of that photographs well. None of that generates likes or comments or immediate recognition. And so the spotlight-addicted person never does that work, never goes that deep, never builds that foundation. They stay at the surface because the surface is where visibility lives. The spotlight costs you time. Every moment spent crafting how something looks is a moment not spent on how it actually is. Every energy devoted to presentation is energy not devoted to production. The visibility requirement creates an entire second job, the job of being seen. And that job takes time from the job that actually matters. The spotlight costs you honesty. When you work in public, you cannot fail in public, or you feel you cannot. So you hide struggles. You mask difficulties. You present a version of your journey that is palatable to audiences rather than true to reality. And this dishonesty with others becomes dishonesty with yourself. You stop knowing what is actually happening because you are so focused on managing what appears to be happening. That is the key. The spotlight is not free. The visibility you crave comes with costs most people never calculate. They see only the benefits. the recognition, the validation, the dopamine hit of being seen. They do not see what visibility is stealing from them. Depth, time, honesty, progress itself. Consider what becomes possible when you escape the trap. You can work on what matters instead of what displays well. You can go deep instead of staying at the surface. You can fail without managing perceptions. You can experiment without announcing. You can build without performing. You can focus entirely on the work because the work is all there is. No audience to satisfy. No visibility to maintain. Just the dark and what you build in it. The dark is not empty. The dark is full of possibility. Full of the space that spotlight addiction eliminates. Full of the depth that visibility prevents. The dark is where the real work happens. The dark is where transformation occurs. The dark is where you become capable of things the spotlight would never have allowed you to develop. You have been chasing the spotlight. You have been seeking visibility. You have been confusing being seen with making progress. But now you understand the trap. Now you see what the spotlight actually costs. Now you have the awareness required to make a different choice. The trap is real, but you do not have to stay in it. You can choose to operate in the dark. You can choose to build without broadcasting. You can choose depth over display. You can choose progress over performance. The choice is yours. It has always been yours. You just did not recognize you were making the wrong one. You understand the spotlight trap now. You see how visibility addiction has been destroying your momentum. But there's a belief underneath that addiction. A belief that your effort deserves to be seen. That your work should be recognized. That recognition is something you are owed. That belief is wrong, and it must be confronted directly. Chapter 2. Nobody owes you recognition. You believe your effort deserves to be seen. You believe your hard work should be acknowledged. You believe that if you struggle, if you sacrifice, if you put in the hours, someone somewhere owes you recognition for it. But nobody owes you anything. Nobody is obligated to notice your struggle. Nobody is required to validate your effort. Nobody is responsible for making you feel seen. This belief that recognition is deserved is a lie you have been telling yourself. A lie that keeps you dependent on external acknowledgement. A lie that must be destroyed if you ever want to build something real. Here is what you need to understand. The universe does not operate on fairness. Effort does not automatically generate recognition. Hard work does not guarantee visibility. Some people work their entire lives on meaningful contributions and are never acknowledged. Others do minimal work and receive enormous attention. The correlation between effort and recognition is weak at best, random at worst, and building your motivation on something this unpredictable is building on sand that will shift beneath you without warning. That is the key. Effort without witness is still effort. The work you do when no one sees is just as real as the work you do when everyone watches. The muscles built in an empty gym are just as strong as muscles built in front of cameras. The pages written in solitude are just as complete as pages written with an audience following along. Recognition does not make effort count. Effort counts regardless of recognition. This is a truth you must internalize at the deepest level. Think about where this entitlement came from. You were taught as a child that effort should be rewarded. You were praised for trying. You received participation trophies. You were told that working hard was enough, that the working itself warranted acknowledgement. And this teaching has crippled you, because the real world does not operate by those rules. The real world does not owe you anything for your effort. The real world responds to results, not to struggle, to outcomes, not to exertion, to what you produce, not to how hard you work producing it. You have a choice. Continue believing recognition is owed and remain perpetually disappointed when it does not arrive. Or accept that recognition is a lottery you cannot control and build your motivation on something more stable. One path leads to constant frustration. The other path leads to freedom from the expectation that was never going to be met anyway. Here is how the recognition lottery actually works. It is random, unpredictable, disconnected from merit in ways that would disturb you if you examine them closely. Mediocre work sometimes goes viral. Excellent work sometimes disappears without trace. A post made at the right moment reaches millions. The same post made an hour earlier reaches dozens. Algorithms decide what gets seen. Timing determines what gets shared. Luck plays a role so large that skill almost seems secondary. Consider the artists whose work was ignored in their lifetime. They created masterpieces. They devoted decades to their craft. They produced work that would eventually be recognized as genius. But during their lives, nothing. No recognition, no validation, no acknowledgement that their effort mattered. Were they less worthy because nobody saw? Was their work less valuable because nobody praised it? Of course not. The recognition lottery simply did not pay out during their lifetime. Their effort was still effort. Their work was still work. The absence of recognition changed nothing about what they actually created. Consider the entrepreneurs who built successful companies without anyone noticing until the success was undeniable. Years of invisible work. Years of no articles written about them. Years of no followers watching their journey. Just building. Just working. Just operating in the dark until the building produced results so significant that recognition became unavoidable. They did not need recognition along the way. They needed only the work and the results the work eventually produced. That is the key. You do not deserve recognition. You earn results. This distinction changes everything. When you focus on deserving recognition, you become passive, waiting, expecting, feeling wronged when what you believe you deserve does not arrive. But when you focus on earning results, you become active, building, producing, creating outcomes that may or may not generate recognition, but that matter regardless. It is not about becoming bitter about recognition. It is not about rejecting acknowledgement if it comes. It is about removing the expectation, about eliminating the entitlement, about understanding that recognition is a bonus, not a right, a possible outcome, not a guaranteed one, a pleasant surprise when it arrives, not a devastating absence when it does not. Here is what happens when you release the entitlement. First, you stop waiting. The waiting that recognition entitlement creates is subtle but devastating. You work, and then you wait to see if the work will be acknowledged. You produce, and then you pause to check if the production was noticed. This waiting fragments your momentum, interrupts your flow, creates dependency on external feedback that may never come. When you release the entitlement, the waiting stops. You work, and then you work more. You produce, and then you produce more. Nothing to wait for, nothing to expect, just the work. Second, you stop being disappointed. The entitlement to recognition creates constant disappointment because recognition so rarely matches effort. You work hard and receive little acknowledgement. You feel wronged, bitter, like the system is unfair. But when you release the entitlement, the disappointment disappears. Recognition was never owed. Its absence is not injustice. Its presence is not justice. It is simply random. And random outcomes do not warrant emotional investment. Third, you become unstoppable. The person who needs recognition to continue can always be stopped by withholding recognition. But the person who has released the entitlement cannot be stopped this way. There is no lever to pull, no button to push, no vulnerability to exploit. They will continue regardless of whether anyone notices, because recognition was never what they were working for. You have a choice. Keep the entitlement and remain stoppable, or release the entitlement and become someone whose progress depends on nothing external. The entitlement feels justified, feels reasonable, feels like basic fairness. But it is a chain you have wrapped around yourself, a chain only you can remove. Here is the shift you must make. From deserving acknowledgement to earning outcomes. This shift is fundamental. It changes your orientation from external to internal, from waiting to be seen to focusing on what you're building, from performing for validation to producing for results. When you operate from deserving, you constantly measure whether the recognition you received matches the effort you exerted. And it almost never does. The measurement always comes up short. The recognition is always less than the effort deserved. And this creates perpetual dissatisfaction, a sense that the world is unfair, that people do not appreciate you, that your work is undervalued. When you operate from earning, you measure only whether your efforts produce results. Did the work generate outcomes? Did the building create something? Did the effort move you closer to objectives? These questions have answers you control, results you can assess independently, outcomes you can evaluate without waiting for external validation. That is the key. Deserving is a victim mentality disguised as fairness. Earning is an ownership mentality focused on outcomes. The deserving person waits for the world to acknowledge them. The earning person builds regardless of whether the world ever notices. One is passive, the other is active. One depends on others. The other depends only on self. Consider what this means practically. You wake up tomorrow to work on your project. If you believe recognition is deserved, you will check throughout the day to see if anyone noticed. You will feel disappointed if the answer is no. Your motivation will dip. Your effort will waver. The absence of recognition will feel like evidence that the work does not matter. But if you have released the entitlement, tomorrow looks different. You wake up and work. You do not check for recognition because recognition is not expected. You measure only whether the work moved forward, whether outcomes advanced, whether results accumulated. Your motivation is stable because it does not depend on external acknowledgement. Your effort is consistent because it does not require validation to continue. Here is the protocol for releasing entitlement. First, catch yourself expecting recognition. Notice when you complete work and then wait to see if it will be acknowledged. Notice when you share something and then obsessively check for responses. Notice when you feel disappointed that effort was not recognized. The noticing is the first step. Awareness of the expectation precedes release of the expectation. Second, remind yourself of the truth. Nobody owes you recognition. Effort without witness is still effort. The recognition lottery is random and you cannot control its outcomes. Results are what you earn. Recognition is what might or might not follow. Repeat these truths until they override the entitlement programming. Third, redirect focus to outcomes. Instead of wondering if anyone noticed, ask whether results occurred. Instead of measuring recognition against effort, measure results against objectives. Train your attention away from external validation and toward internal assessment. The entitlement to recognition has been sabotaging you, making you dependent on outcomes you cannot control, creating disappointment that drains motivation, producing waiting that fragments momentum. Release it, not because recognition does not feel good when it arrives. It does, but because needing recognition is a vulnerability. Expecting recognition is a weakness. And you cannot build anything significant while carrying that vulnerability, that weakness, that entitlement that makes your progress dependent on the whims of others. You understand now that nobody owes you recognition. You understand that effort without witness still counts. You understand the shift from deserving to earning. But there's another layer to explore. Not just releasing the need for recognition, but understanding why silence itself is necessary for your best work. Chapter 3. Your best work requires silence. You have been working out loud, sharing every step, broadcasting every beginning, inviting the world into your process before the process has produced anything worth sharing. And this noise is destroying your best work, not damaging it slightly, destroying it completely, because depth requires silence. Mastery requires solitude. The work that actually matters cannot survive the constant interruption of external input, external feedback, external eyes watching every move you make. Your best work requires silence, and you've been denying it that silence while wondering why your work never reaches its potential. Here is what you need to understand. Constant sharing fragments your attention. Every time you pause to post an update, you break focus. Every time you check for responses, you interrupt concentration. Every time you seek feedback, you introduce external voices into a process that should be internally driven. The fragmentation seems small in each instance. A moment here, a minute there, but the accumulation is devastating. The depth that could have been achieved is replaced by surface-level work produced between interruptions. That is the key. Noise produces performance. Silence produces mastery. When you work in noise, when you broadcast and share and invite constant input, you are performing. You are creating for an audience in real time. And performance has different requirements than mastery. Performance demands accessibility. Mastery demands depth. Performance requires constant engagement. Mastery requires extended isolation. You cannot perform and master simultaneously. The conditions contradict each other. Think about the deepest work you have ever done. The project where you lost yourself completely. The creation that consumed you. The effort that produced something you were genuinely proud of. Was that work done in public? Was it broadcast at every stage? Were you checking for feedback throughout the process? Almost certainly not. Almost certainly that work was done in some version of silence. Away from eyes. Away from input. Away from the noise that fragments everything it touches. You have a choice. Continue working in noise and continue producing surface-level results. Or embrace silence and discover the depth you have been preventing. One path is comfortable, social, connected, but shallow. The other path is isolating, uncomfortable, solitary, but deep. Your best work is waiting on the path you have been avoiding because that path requires you to disconnect from the constant validation you have become addicted to. Here is the creative cost of broadcasting. Every time you share work in progress, you leak creative energy. This is not metaphor. This is mechanism. The creative impulse has a charge, an energy, a drive toward completion. When you share prematurely, you discharge some of that energy. You receive recognition for the incomplete. You satisfy the urge for acknowledgement before the work warrants acknowledgement. And the energy that would have pushed you toward completion dissipates in the premature sharing. Consider the writer who discusses their book before writing it. They have an idea, an exciting idea, a book they believe will matter, and they share it. They tell friends about the concept. They post about their writing journey. They announce the project before the first chapter is complete. What happens? Often nothing. The book never gets written. The energy that could have produced pages was spent producing conversations about pages that never materialized. The sharing satisfied something that should have remained unsatisfied until completion. Consider the entrepreneur who pitches ideas they never build. They have vision after vision, concept after concept, and they share each one. They get feedback. They receive validation for the idea. They experience the pleasure of being seen as innovative, creative, entrepreneurial. But the businesses never launch. The products never ship. The ideas remain ideas because the sharing discharged the energy that building would have required. That is the key. Premature sharing substitutes for completion. It provides enough satisfaction to reduce the drive for actual accomplishment, enough recognition to quiet the internal push toward results. You feel like you have done something because you shared something, but sharing is not doing. Announcing is not accomplishing. The satisfaction is false. The progress is illusory. It is not about never sharing anything. It is not about permanent secrecy. It is about timing, about protecting the creative process during its vulnerable phases, about allowing work to develop in silence until it is strong enough to survive exposure. Premature exposure kills. Timely exposure reveals what silence protected long enough to become real. Here is what silence provides that noise cannot. First, silence provides depth. When you work without broadcasting, you can go deeper. You can follow ideas without wondering how they will play to an audience. You can explore tangents without considering whether they are shareable. You can fail repeatedly without managing perceptions around each failure. The depth becomes possible because there is no surface to perform for. Second, silence provides honesty. When you work in public, you edit for audience. You shape your process to be presentable. You hide struggles that might not photograph well. You create a curated version of your work that may have little relationship to the actual work. But in silence, there is no audience to perform for, no curation required, no presentation to manage, just the honest reality of what you are doing and whether it is working. Third, silence provides vision protection. When you share work in progress, you invite opinions, feedback, suggestions, and those external inputs can distort your vision, can pull your work in directions others think it should go rather than directions you know it must go. Silence protects your vision from this distortion, allows your work to develop according to your sense of what it should become, not everyone else's sense. You have a choice. Work in noise and accept fragmentation, premature discharge, and vision distortion. Or work in silence and access depth, honest process, and protected vision. The noise feels productive, feels connected, feels like you're making progress because others are witnessing progress. But the feeling is deceptive. The noise is stealing the very things that would make your work actually matter. Here is the protocol for building the silence practice. First, create periods of complete creative silence. Not reduced sharing. Complete absence of sharing. Periods where no one knows what you're working on. Where no updates are posted. Where no feedback is sought. Where the work exists only in the space between you and it. Start with short periods. A day. A week. Build tolerance for longer periods as the discomfort of invisibility decreases. Second, complete before you share. Make this a rule. The work must be finished before anyone sees it. Not almost finished, actually finished. This rule breaks the premature sharing habit, forces you to experience the full creative cycle without external input, forces you to discover whether you can sustain effort without the intermittent reinforcement of recognition along the way. Third, limit feedback sources ruthlessly. When you do eventually seek input, seek it from very few people. People whose judgment you trust completely. People who understand what you're trying to create. Not the general public. Not social media followers. Not anyone who happens to be available. The limitation protects your vision while still allowing useful input. Consider what becomes possible with silence. The book that requires 2 years of focused work becomes possible when you stop seeking recognition during those 2 years. The skill that requires 10,000 hours becomes achievable when you stop interrupting those hours with broadcasting. The business that requires quiet building becomes buildable when you stop announcing every phase of construction. Silence makes possible what noise prevents. That is the key. You do not need permission to work in silence. You do not need anyone to agree that silence is valuable. You simply need to stop sharing, stop announcing, stop inviting noise into spaces that require silence. The permission is already yours. The capacity is already yours. What has been missing is the recognition that silence is not deprivation. Silence is the condition your best work has been waiting for. Here is what most people never discover. They never discover what they are capable of because they never create conditions where capability can develop. They fragment their attention with constant sharing. They discharge their creative energy through premature announcement. They distort their vision through excessive feedback. And then they wonder why their work never reaches the level they sense it could reach. The answer is not talent. The answer is not opportunity. The answer is silence. The silence they never provided. The depth they never allowed. The protection they never offered to their own creative process. You have been working in noise. You have been broadcasting when you should have been building. You have been performing when you should have been mastering. But now you understand what silence provides. Now you see the cost of noise. Now you have the awareness required to make a different choice. Your best work is waiting. Waiting in the silence you have been afraid to enter. Waiting in the depth you have been avoiding. Waiting for you to finally provide the conditions it needs to emerge. Stop broadcasting. Start building. Let silence do what noise never could. You understand that your best work requires silence. You understand the cost of premature sharing. You understand the depth that becomes possible when noise is eliminated. But there is something driving the noise, something deeper than habit, an addiction to validation that must be confronted directly and overcome completely. Chapter 4. Validation is a drug you must quit. You are addicted. The word feels extreme. It feels like it applies to other people with other problems. But it applies to you. Right now, in this moment, you are addicted to validation, to the approval of others, to the recognition that tells you your work matters, your effort counts, your existence is significant. And like any addiction, this one is destroying your capacity to function without it. Every hit feels necessary. Every absence creates withdrawal. Every day without validation feels like a day where something essential is missing. You have become dependent on a substance you cannot control. And until you quit, until you break the addiction completely, you will remain incapable of operating in the dark where real success is built. Here is what you need to understand. Validation operates with the same mechanics as any drug. The first hit feels amazing. Recognition for your work. Approval for your effort. Acknowledgement that you matter. The feeling is powerful. Intoxicating. Something you want to experience again. So you seek another hit. And you find it. And it feels good. But not quite as good as the first time. So you seek more. Larger doses. More frequent recognition. More substantial acknowledgement. The tolerance builds. What satisfied you before no longer satisfies. What felt like enough becomes insufficient. The addiction deepens. That is the key. Every validation hit weakens your internal engine. This is the hidden cost most people never calculate. Each time you receive external validation, you reinforce the belief that external validation is necessary. Each hit confirms the dependency, strengthens the neural pathways that say you need this to continue, weakens the internal systems that could provide what validation provides if only they were allowed to develop. You are strengthening your chains with every hit you take. Think about what happens when validation is absent. You feel uncertain, anxious, like something is wrong, like you cannot proceed until confirmation arrives that proceeding is correct. These feelings are withdrawal symptoms. They're your addicted brain protesting the absence of its required substance. And most people, when they feel this discomfort, do not recognize it as withdrawal. They interpret it as evidence that they actually need validation, that the validation is genuinely necessary rather than merely addicted to. The addiction uses its own symptoms to justify its continuation. You have a choice. Continue feeding the addiction and remain permanently dependent on external approval. Or quit completely. Endure the withdrawal. Build internal systems to replace what validation was providing. Become someone who can operate indefinitely without a single hit of external recognition. One path keeps you enslaved. The other path offers freedom. But the freedom path runs through discomfort you have been avoiding. Here is what withdrawal looks like. When you stop seeking validation, discomfort follows immediately. The urge to share arises. The urge to check for responses. The urge to seek confirmation that what you are doing matters. These urges are strong. They feel like necessities, like genuine needs rather than addicted cravings. And most people give in to them. Most people interpret the discomfort as evidence that they should seek validation. They never push through to discover what exists on the other side of withdrawal. The discomfort intensifies before it fades. The first days without validation hits are the hardest. The uncertainty grows. The anxiety increases. The sense that something is wrong becomes almost overwhelming. Your brain is screaming for the substance you have been denying it. Every mechanism of addiction is activated, trying to get you to resume the behavior that was feeding it. This is where most people fail. This is where most people decide that validation must actually be necessary because its absence feels this uncomfortable. But if you persist, if you endure the discomfort without giving in, something shifts. The urges become less intense. The anxiety begins to fade. The uncertainty starts to feel manageable. Your brain begins to adjust to the absence of external validation, begins to develop alternative systems, begins to build the internal engine that addiction prevented from forming. The withdrawal passes, and on the other side is freedom. That is the key. Withdrawal is temporary. Freedom is permanent. The discomfort of quitting validation lasts weeks, perhaps months. But the freedom from needing validation lasts the rest of your life. The math is simple. Short-term discomfort for long-term liberation. Yet most people cannot make this trade because they cannot tolerate the short-term discomfort long enough to reach the long-term benefit. It is not about never receiving validation again. It is about not needing it, about being able to receive recognition without requiring it, about validation becoming a pleasant surprise rather than a desperate necessity. The difference is dependency. The non-addicted person can enjoy validation when it arrives and continue perfectly well when it does not. The addicted person cannot function without regular hits. You are currently the addicted person. You must become the non-addicted person. Here is how to build internal validation systems. First, develop the capacity to assess your own work. Most people cannot evaluate whether their work is good without external input. They have outsourced judgment completely. They know something is good only when others say it is good. This outsourcing must be reversed. You must build the capacity to know when your work meets your standards, to assess quality independently, to trust your own judgment rather than requiring the judgment of others. This capacity is built through practice. You complete work and evaluate it yourself before seeking any external input. You ask specific questions. Does this meet my standards? Did I give this my full effort? Is this work I can respect regardless of whether others recognize it? You answer these questions honestly. You develop confidence in your own assessment. You build the internal evaluation system that external validation has been replacing. Second, create internal progress markers. Since you're no longer waiting for external recognition to confirm progress, you need internal systems that provide this confirmation. Metrics you track, milestones you define, evidence of advancement that you can see regardless of whether anyone else notices. The daily log of work completed, the weekly assessment of skills developed, the monthly review of objectives achieved. These internal markers replace the external validation you were using to know whether you were moving forward. Third, define standards that are yours, not standards borrowed from what others approve of, not standards based on what generates recognition, standards that reflect what you actually value, what you actually respect, what you would actually be proud of regardless of whether anyone else ever saw it. When your standards are truly yours, meeting them provides something external validation never could: a sense of integrity, of alignment between what you value and what you produce. This alignment generates its own form of validation, internal validation that no external source can provide. You have a choice: continue with outsourced judgment, external progress markers, and borrowed standards, or build internal systems that provide what validation was providing. One path keeps you dependent. The other path makes you self-sufficient. One path requires constant external input. The other path requires only your own assessment, your own tracking, your own standards. Here is the protocol for quitting validation. First, go cold turkey on seeking. Stop checking for responses. Stop fishing for compliments. Stop sharing with the implicit or explicit request for acknowledgement. Stop all behaviors whose primary purpose is generating external validation. This is not reducing. This is eliminating. The addiction requires complete cessation, not moderation. You cannot be a little addicted. You are either dependent or you are not. Second, survive the withdrawal without giving in. When the urge to seek validation arises, notice it, name it, recognize it as addiction rather than genuine need, and do not act on it. Let the urge exist without obeying it. Let the discomfort be present without relieving it. The urge will pass. The discomfort will fade, but only if you do not give in. Every hit resets the withdrawal. Every validation sought extends the addiction. You must endure without giving in, or the freedom will never arrive. Third, replace with internal systems. As you stop seeking external validation, actively build the internal alternatives. Develop self-assessment capacity. Create internal progress markers. Define personal standards. Fill the space that validation was occupying with something more stable, something you control, something that does not depend on others choosing to provide it. Consider what becomes possible when the addiction breaks. You can work on projects that will never be publicly recognized because public recognition is no longer what you need. You can build in complete darkness because the darkness no longer feels like deprivation. You can sustain effort for years without external acknowledgement because your internal systems provide all the confirmation you require. The addiction was limiting what you could attempt. Breaking it expands your possibilities to include everything that operates beyond the reach of external validation. That is the key. Validation addiction has been limiting your life to what can be externally recognized. This is a tiny fraction of what is possible. The work that matters most often happens invisible. The building that produces greatest results often occurs without observers. The efforts that transform you most deeply often generate no external validation whatsoever. The addiction has been keeping you from all of this. Breaking it opens access to everything validation was blocking. Here is the truth most validation addicts never discover. Internal validation is more satisfying than external validation. The recognition from others is fleeting, unreliable, often disconnected from actual quality. But the recognition you give yourself, when earned through meeting standards you genuinely respect, is solid, stable, directly connected to what you actually produced. The internal hit, when you have built the capacity to generate it, exceeds anything external validation ever provided. You have been chasing the inferior form, seeking external recognition when internal recognition was always available and always superior. But internal recognition requires internal systems. Systems you never built because you were too busy seeking external hits. The building starts now. The addiction ends now. The freedom begins now. You understand that validation is a drug. You understand the mechanics of addiction. You understand withdrawal and how to survive it. You understand how to build internal systems that replace what validation provided. But there is more to understand. The work you do in withdrawal, the effort you sustain without recognition, that work compounds. That effort accumulates. The next chapter reveals how. Chapter 5. The compound effect of unseen effort. You want immediate results. You want visible progress. You want to see the return on your effort right now, today, in ways you can measure and others can witness. And this impatience is blinding you to how success actually works. Because the most powerful force in achievement is not intensity. It is not talent. It is not even strategy. It is compounding, the accumulation of small efforts over extended time. Efforts that seem insignificant individually, but become unstoppable collectively. And here's what you have been missing. Unseen effort compounds exactly the same as visible effort. The work no one witnesses accumulates just as powerfully as the work everyone applauds. The dark does not diminish. The dark develops. Here is what you need to understand. Every rep no one sees still builds muscle. Every page no one reads still develops skill. Every hour no one witnesses still accumulates toward mastery. The physics of improvement do not require an audience. The mechanics of growth do not depend on recognition. Your body does not build strength only when someone is watching. Your brain does not develop capability only when someone is acknowledging. The work works regardless of whether anyone knows you're doing it. That is the key. Invisible progress is still progress. This truth seems obvious when stated directly, but your behavior reveals you do not actually believe it. Because if you believed it, you would not need recognition to continue. You would not stop when no one notices. You would not require witnesses to sustain your effort. Your actions reveal that somewhere, at some level, you believe unseen effort counts less, matters less, produces less. And this belief is factually wrong, demonstrably wrong. The dark does not diminish what you build. The dark simply builds without an audience. Think about the person who exercises alone every morning. No trainer watching, no gym partner observing, no social media followers tracking progress. Just them and the work, day after day, week after week, month after month. The muscles built in that solitude are identical to muscles built under observation. The cardiovascular improvement is identical. The strength gains are identical. The audience adds nothing to the physical results. Nothing. The work compounds regardless of witnesses. Now, think about the person who exercises only when others are watching, who needs the trainer present to push hard, who requires the gym partner to show up consistently, who cannot sustain effort without followers watching their journey. Their results are limited by audience availability. Their progress is constrained by witness presence. They have made their development dependent on factors they cannot control. And that dependency limits what they can achieve. You have a choice. Be the person whose effort compounds regardless of witnesses, or be the person whose effort requires observation to accumulate. One path is limited only by your consistency. The other path is limited by audience availability and attention. One path can continue indefinitely in complete darkness. The other path stalls whenever the spotlight dims. Here is how compounding actually works. Small efforts seem insignificant individually. One workout produces no visible change. 1 hour of practice creates no noticeable improvement. 1 day of focused work generates no measurable result. The individual units appear worthless. And most people, seeing no immediate result, conclude that the effort was wasted, that the work did not count, that nothing happened. They quit because the compounding is invisible in its early stages. But the efforts are accumulating. Each workout is adding to what previous workouts started. Each hour of practice is building on what previous hours established. Each day of focused work is advancing what previous days began. The accumulation is real even when invisible. The progress is occurring even when unmeasurable. The compounding is operating even when you cannot see it working. Then something shifts. The accumulated efforts reach a threshold. The invisible progress becomes visible. The unmeasurable improvement becomes measurable. What seemed like nothing suddenly reveals itself as something substantial. The person who kept going despite no visible results suddenly has results everyone could see. The compounding that was operating in the dark finally emerges into the light. That is the key. Work done in the dark does not stay invisible forever. It compounds until it becomes undeniable, until it breaks through into visibility, not because you sought attention, but because results demanded it. The overnight success that took 10 years. The sudden breakthrough that followed decades of invisible preparation. These are not anomalies. These are how compounding works. Long periods of invisible accumulation followed by visible emergence. It is not about patience as passive waiting. It is about patience as active compounding. You are not waiting for results. You are building results that are not yet visible. You are accumulating progress that has not yet crossed the visibility threshold. The waiting is not empty. The waiting is full of compounding that will eventually become undeniable. Consider the examples that demonstrate this truth. The writer who wrote for years before anyone read their work. Hundreds of pages no one saw. Thousands of hours no one witnessed. Skills developing in complete obscurity. Then one piece breaks through, and suddenly everyone sees the talent. But the talent was built in the dark. The talent was compounded through invisible effort. The visibility arrived only after the compounding made it inevitable. The entrepreneur who built systems for years before generating significant revenue. Early mornings and late nights, no one observed. Problems solved and skills developed without witnesses. Then the business crosses a threshold, and suddenly everyone sees the success. But the success was constructed in the dark. The success was compounded through unseen effort. The spotlight arrived only after the building made it unavoidable. The athlete who trained alone for years before anyone knew their name. Repetitions no one counted. Hours no one logged. Improvement no one noticed. Then they emerge into competition and dominate. And suddenly everyone sees the ability. But the ability was forged in the dark. The ability was compounded through effort no audience witnessed. The recognition arrived only after the training made it inescapable. You have a choice. Trust the compounding and continue in the dark. Or demand immediate visibility and quit when compounding has not yet produced visible results. One path reaches the threshold where invisible becomes undeniable. The other path abandons before the threshold is ever reached. One path produces the breakthroughs others marvel at. The other path produces another person who tried for a while and gave up. Here is the protocol for tracking invisible progress. Since no external validation marks your advancement, you must develop internal tracking systems. You must create visibility for yourself that does not depend on others witnessing. First, keep a daily log of effort. Not results. Effort. The work you did today. the hours you invested, the actions you completed. This log provides evidence of compounding in progress, shows that accumulation is occurring even when outcomes are not yet visible. The log becomes your own witness, your own record, your own proof that the dark is not empty. Second, define internal milestones. Not milestones based on external recognition. Milestones based on effort accumulated. 100 hours of practice. 50 completed workouts. 20 chapters written. Whatever metrics reflect genuine progress in your domain. These milestones provide the acknowledgement that external sources are not providing. They confirm advancement independently of whether anyone else notices. Third, review periodically for invisible progress. Compare where you are to where you were, not where others are. Where you were 3 months ago, 6 months ago, a year ago. The comparison often reveals progress that daily experience obscured. Improvements that happened so gradually they were invisible in real time, but become obvious in retrospect. This review provides evidence that compounding has been operating even when you could not feel it. That is the key. You must become your own witness, your own tracker, your own validator of progress. Not because external recognition is never coming. It may come eventually when compounding breaks through into visibility. But because you cannot wait for external recognition to know whether you are advancing. You need internal systems that provide this knowledge. Systems that keep you going when the dark feels empty. When the effort feels pointless. When the compounding is operating but invisible. Consider what this means for your approach. You're building something in the dark right now. Something no one sees. Something no one acknowledges. And every day you question whether the effort matters. Whether the work is counting. Whether anything is actually accumulating. The answer is yes. The effort matters. The work counts. The accumulation is real. You just cannot see it yet. But the compounding is operating regardless of your ability to perceive it. Your job is not to see the compounding. Your job is to continue feeding it. Here is what most people get wrong. They use visibility as the measure of progress. If others can see results, progress has occurred. If others cannot see results, progress has not occurred. This measurement is fundamentally flawed because compounding spends most of its time in the invisible phase. The accumulation that eventually produces undeniable results is invisible for far longer than it is visible. Using visibility as your measure means concluding no progress is occurring during the exact period when most progress actually occurs. The correct measure is effort invested. Did you do the work today? Yes or no? That is the measure. Not whether anyone saw. Not whether results are visible yet. Not whether recognition arrived. Did you feed the compounding? Did you add to the accumulation? Did you contribute another unit to the effort that will eventually break through into visibility? If yes, progress occurred. If no, progress did not occur. The measure is entirely within your control, entirely independent of external validation. You have been measuring wrong. You have been using visibility as your indicator. And visibility has been lying to you, telling you nothing is happening when accumulation was active, telling you to quit when you were closer than you knew to breakthrough. The visibility measure has sabotaged your compounding repeatedly, caused you to stop feeding what needed more feeding, caused you to abandon efforts right before they would have produced undeniable results. Change the measure. Measure effort, not visibility. Measure accumulation, not recognition. Measure what you control, not what depends on external factors. This change allows you to continue in the dark, to persist when nothing visible is happening, to feed the compounding that eventually makes visibility inevitable rather than quitting because visibility has not yet arrived. The dark does not diminish. The dark develops. Every unseen effort is still building. Every unwitnessed hour is still accumulating. Every invisible day is still feeding the compounding that will eventually break through. Trust this. Know this. Continue contributing to this. And watch what happens when the accumulation finally becomes undeniable. You understand now that unseen effort compounds. You understand how to track invisible progress. You understand why visibility is the wrong measure. But there is still a dependency operating, a need that must be killed completely. The need for witnesses. The need for someone to see you working even if they do not applaud. That need is the next chain to break. Chapter 6. Kill your need for witnesses. You perform differently when someone is watching. You work harder. You push longer. You sustain effort more effectively. And this reveals a truth you have been avoiding. You need witnesses, not applause, not recognition, just the presence of eyes on your effort. Someone knowing that you are working is enough to change how you work. And this need for witnesses is a chain you do not recognize as a chain. It feels like accountability. It feels like motivation. It feels like using social pressure productively. But it is dependency, pure dependency. And dependency of any kind makes you controllable, makes you stoppable, makes your progress contingent on factors outside yourself. Here is what you need to understand. If you need eyes to perform, you're not performing for yourself. You're performing for the eyes. The work changes based on observation. The effort adjusts based on who is watching. This means your performance is not yours. It belongs to whoever is observing. It rises and falls with their presence or absence. You have outsourced your own effort to the availability of witnesses. And witnesses are not always available. Witnesses lose interest. Witnesses look elsewhere. When they do, your performance collapses because it was never truly yours to begin with. That is the key. The need for witnesses is still a need. It may feel less desperate than the need for applause, less obvious than the need for validation, but it operates by the same mechanics. You require something external to function at your best. You cannot generate full effort internally. You depend on the presence of others to access what should be available to you alone. This is weakness disguised as strategy. Dependency dressed as accountability. Think about what happens when no one is watching. You are alone. No one knows what you are doing. No one will ever know whether you followed through or gave up. What happens to your effort? For most people, the effort decreases. The intensity drops. The commitment wavers. Because the internal engine is weak. Because without witnesses, the motivation disappears. Because the effort was never truly internal. It was always extracted by the presence of external eyes. You have a choice. Continue needing witnesses and remain limited by their availability. Or kill the need completely and become someone whose effort is identical whether observed or alone. One path makes you dependent on others being present. The other path makes you self-sufficient regardless of who is or is not watching. One path is common. Nearly everyone operates this way. The other path is rare. And rare is where competitive advantage lives. Here is how witness dependency actually works. You announce a goal to someone. Now they know. Now they might ask about your progress. Now their awareness creates pressure to follow through. This feels like accountability. This feels like a smart strategy for ensuring completion. But examine what is actually happening. You have created external pressure because you lack internal pressure. You have manufactured motivation through witness creation because you cannot manufacture it yourself. The strategy works, but it works by compensating for a weakness rather than addressing it. The problem is that witness-dependent motivation is brittle. The witness forgets to ask. The pressure fades. The observation becomes inconsistent, and your effort follows. It rises when attention is present and falls when attention is absent. You have not built capability. You have built dependency on a specific condition. And conditions change. Conditions cannot be controlled. Building on conditions is building on instability. Consider the person who exercises only when they have a workout partner. The partner provides the witness. The witness provides the motivation. The motivation produces the workout. This seems fine. Workouts are happening. Progress is occurring. But what happens when the partner is unavailable? What happens when schedules conflict? What happens when a witness disappears? The workouts stop because the workouts were never internally driven. They were externally extracted. The capability to exercise was always there, but the capability to motivate exercise was not. That is the key. Witness dependency reveals weak internal motivation. It exposes that you have not built the capacity to drive yourself, that you require external pressure to produce what should be internally generated. The dependency is not a strategy. The dependency is a symptom of undeveloped internal capability. It is not about rejecting all external accountability. It is about not needing it, about being able to leverage external pressure when useful while also being able to function perfectly well without it. The person who can work alone but chooses to work with others is different from the person who cannot work alone and must work with others. Same external behavior, completely different internal reality. One is free, one is dependent. Here is how to train yourself to operate unseen. The training is simple but uncomfortable. You must deliberately create conditions where no one knows whether you follow through, where no witnesses exist, where the only accountability is internal. And then you must follow through anyway. You must prove to yourself that you can sustain effort without eyes on you, that your internal engine is strong enough to function alone. First, stop announcing intentions. When you plan to do something difficult, do not tell anyone. Keep the plan entirely private. No one knows you intend to wake early. No one knows you plan to write today. No one knows you committed to the workout. This removal of witnesses creates the testing condition. Now you must perform without the pressure of external awareness. Now you discover whether your motivation is truly internal or merely borrowed from the presence of others. Second, complete difficult tasks in isolation. Work that no one will ever see. Effort that no one will ever know occurred. The quality of work you produce when completely alone, when the work will never be observed or evaluated by anyone, this reveals your true level of internal motivation. If the quality drops dramatically, you have discovered your dependency. If the quality remains high, you have discovered your capability. Third, track your own compliance honestly. Since no external party is monitoring your follow-through, you must monitor it yourself. Did you do what you said you would do? Not what you told others. What you told yourself. Keep a record. Be ruthlessly honest. This record provides internal accountability that replaces the external accountability you are removing. You become your own witness. And eventually, your own witness is enough. You have a choice. Continue using external witnesses as a crutch that compensates for weak internal motivation, or develop internal motivation strong enough that witnesses become optional. One path is easier in the short term. The external pressure does the work that internal development would require. But the path leads nowhere, just continued dependency. The other path requires building something you currently lack. But what you build becomes permanently yours, portable, available in any circumstance, independent of who is or is not watching. Here is the power of anonymous contribution. Some of the most significant work in human history was done by people who received no recognition, who had no witnesses, who contributed enormously without anyone knowing their names. They built things, created things, advanced things, all in complete obscurity. Their motivation was not extracted by external eyes. Their effort was not dependent on witnesses. They prove that meaningful work can happen entirely in the dark. That impact does not require observation. Consider the scientist who contributes to research they will never be credited for, whose work becomes part of something larger, but whose name disappears into the collective effort. They continue anyway. They produce anyway. They contribute anyway. Because the work matters independent of recognition. Because their motivation is internal. Because they have killed the need for witnesses that would make such contribution impossible. Consider the mentor who shapes lives without acknowledgement, who gives advice that transforms trajectories but receives no credit for the transformation, who invests in others knowing the investment will never be visible, never be tracked back to them, never generate recognition. They continue anyway, because the impact matters, because their satisfaction is internal, because the need for witnesses has been killed. That is the key. When you kill the need for witnesses, you become capable of contributions that witness-dependent people cannot make. You can do important work that will never be attributed to you. You can build important things that will never carry your name. You can have impact that will never generate recognition. This is not sacrifice. This is freedom. Freedom from the limitation that restricts most people to only work that can be witnessed and credited. Here is what witness-free operation actually provides. First, it provides consistency. Your effort does not fluctuate based on who is watching, does not rise and fall with observer presence, does not depend on conditions you cannot control. The consistency compounds over time, produces results that inconsistent, witness-dependent effort cannot match. Second, it provides integrity. What you do alone matches what you do when observed. There is no performance gap, no difference between public and private behavior. This alignment creates a stable identity, a solid foundation that witness dependency cannot provide. Third, it provides freedom of domain. You can work in areas where witnesses are not available, where recognition is not possible, where the work must be done in complete darkness or not done at all. Witness-dependent people cannot operate in these domains. You can. Consider what this means for your life. You wake up tomorrow. No one knows what you plan to do. No one is watching. No one will ever know whether you followed through. In that moment, who are you? What do you do? Your answer reveals the strength of your internal engine, reveals whether you have killed the need for witnesses or merely suppressed it temporarily, reveals whether you can operate in the dark or only in the light of observation. The need for witnesses must die, not diminish. Die. You must become someone whose effort is identical with or without eyes on it, whose quality of work does not depend on whether anyone will ever see it, whose follow-through is guaranteed by internal commitment alone. This transformation is possible. This capability can be built, but only through the deliberate training of operating unseen. Only through repeatedly proving to yourself that you do not need what you thought you needed. You learn to kill your need for witnesses. You understand now that effort must be internally driven, that dependency on observation is still dependency. But there is another pattern to address. The pattern of announcing too early, of sharing before results warrant sharing, of leaking progress when progress should be contained. Chapter 7. Silence your progress until it screams. You announce too early. The moment you start something, you share it. The moment you make progress, you broadcast it. The moment anything positive happens, you feel the overwhelming urge to tell someone, to post something, to make your advancement known. And this premature announcement is sabotaging everything you're trying to build. Because progress shared too early is progress weakened. Energy leaked. Momentum dispersed. You are opening the container before anything substantial has accumulated. You are releasing pressure that should be building towards something explosive. Your progress should be silenced until it screams. Instead, you whisper it to the world before it has found its voice. Here is what you need to understand. Every goal announced prematurely leaks energy. This is not metaphor. This is mechanism. The human brain experiences a satisfaction response when goals are announced. Recognition for intention. Acknowledgement for commitment. Praise for the direction you have chosen. This satisfaction feels like progress. Feels like you have done something. But you have done nothing except announce. The satisfaction was premature. The reward was unearned. And the energy that would have pushed you toward actual completion was partially discharged through the announcement itself. That is the key. Let results speak. They are louder than announcements. When you announce intention, you create noise. When you produce results, you create signal. The difference matters. Noise is ignored over time. Signal cannot be ignored. Noise requires constant repetition to maintain attention. Signal speaks once and is heard forever. You have been creating noise when you should have been building signal. Announcing when you should have been accumulating. Speaking when you should have been silencing. Think about your pattern. You decide on a goal. What happens next? For most people, the urge to share is immediate. Tell a friend. Post about it. Announce the new direction. This urge feels natural. Feels exciting. Feels like the appropriate response to a significant decision. But the urge is addiction. The urge is your validation-seeking brain demanding its hit. The urge is premature satisfaction that substitutes for actual achievement. And following this urge has been sabotaging your goals since you started following it. You have a choice. Continue announcing prematurely and continue watching goals dissolve before completion. Or learn strategic silence and discover what happens when energy accumulates instead of leaking. One path feels better immediately. The social reward of announcement. The recognition for intention. The validation for direction. The other path feels worse immediately. The discomfort of containing. The pressure of unreleased news. The difficulty of sitting with progress no one knows about. But the second path produces results. The first path produces only announcements about results that never arrive. Here is why premature announcement destroys achievement. First, it provides satisfaction without accomplishment. You feel good about the announcement. You receive positive responses. You experience recognition. And this feeling of progress substitutes for actual progress. The brain is partially satisfied. The drive toward completion is partially diminished. You have taken the reward without doing the work that was supposed to generate the reward. Second, it invites interference. When you announce, you invite opinions, feedback, suggestions, concerns, doubts from others projected onto your plans. Questions that create uncertainty where certainty existed. Well-meaning advice that distorts your direction. Every announcement opens a door, and through that door come influences that may not serve your vision. Silence keeps the door closed, keeps your progress protected from external interference until it is strong enough to withstand it. Third, it creates pressure from the wrong source. When you announce, people expect. They ask about progress. They check on your commitment. This pressure might seem helpful. Accountability, motivation through social expectation. But the pressure is external. The pressure is about not looking bad rather than about actual achievement. The pressure pushes you to appear successful rather than to be successful. And appearing successful and being successful are different things. Sometimes opposite things. That is the key. Silence protects your progress from premature satisfaction, external interference, and misdirected pressure. Silence is not suppression. Silence is protection. Protection for something vulnerable and developing. Protection for something that needs to grow in darkness before it can survive in light. It is not about permanent secrecy. It is not about never sharing anything with anyone. It is about timing. Strategic timing. Sharing when results are strong enough that sharing serves them rather than weakens them. Sharing when the work has reached a point where feedback is useful rather than distracting. Sharing when you have something real to share rather than merely intentions. Here is the announcement addiction exposed. You feel compelled to share every beginning, every decision to start, every commitment to try. This compulsion is not enthusiasm. This compulsion is addiction. The announcement provides a hit. Social recognition for your intentions. Validation for your plans. The feeling of progress without the substance of progress. And like any addictive hit, this one creates craving for the next one. Creates a pattern of announcement after announcement, beginning after beginning, without the completions that should follow. Consider how many things you have announced that you never finished. Goals declared publicly that quietly disappeared. Projects shared excitedly that were never mentioned again. Commitments broadcast that were broken in private. The announcements happened. The completions did not. And nobody says anything because nobody wants to embarrass you by pointing out the gap between what you announced and what you delivered. The social contract protects you from accountability, allows you to announce endlessly without ever having to complete. This is why silence is essential. When you announce nothing, you own nothing. When you share no commitments, you create no expectations. When you keep your progress private, the only accountability is internal. And internal accountability can be brutal in ways external accountability cannot. Because you cannot escape yourself. You cannot pretend with yourself. You cannot manage perceptions with yourself. You either did the work or you did not. And only you know the answer. You have a choice. Continue announcing and continue enjoying the premature satisfaction while results fail to materialize. Or embrace silence and discover what happens when you have no choice but to complete because no announcement has provided an alternative source of satisfaction. The announcement addict finishes little because announcements satisfy enough to reduce completion drive. The silent worker finishes much because silence provides no satisfaction except through actual completion. Here is the protocol for strategic silence. First, set a completion threshold before any sharing occurs. Define what done means. Define what results would constitute something worth sharing. Then maintain complete silence until that threshold is reached. Not mostly silent, not sharing with just a few people. Complete silence. The threshold must be reached before anyone knows anything. Second, resist the urge actively. The urge to share will arise. It will feel compelling. It will offer justifications. Just telling one person, just posting a small update, just sharing the general direction. Recognize these as the addiction seeking its hit. Recognize these as the premature satisfaction that has been sabotaging your completions. Refuse them every time, without exception. Third, use the contained energy. The energy that would have dispersed through sharing must go somewhere. Direct it into the work. Let the pressure that builds from containing become fuel for completion. The frustration of not being able to share transforms into determination to reach the point where sharing becomes appropriate. The pressure becomes propulsion. Consider what becomes possible when you silence your progress. The project that requires 6 months of invisible work becomes possible when you're not leaking energy through monthly updates. The skill that requires years of private development becomes achievable when you are not performing progress instead of making progress. The transformation that requires deep internal work becomes accessible when you are not broadcasting each step to audiences who do not need to know. That is the key. Some things can only be built in silence. Some achievements are only possible when the building process is protected from premature exposure. Some results require accumulation that cannot occur if the container keeps being opened. You have been opening the container too early, releasing pressure that should have been building, leaking energy that should have been accumulating, and then wondering why the explosion of results never arrives. Here is when to break silence. Not when you want recognition, not when you crave validation, not when the pressure of containing becomes uncomfortable. You break silence when results have reached the point where they speak for themselves, when the work is undeniable, when what you have built is strong enough to survive exposure and benefit from it. This is not a feeling. This is an assessment. Has the work reached a point where showing it serves the work rather than just serving your need to be seen? The screaming point is unmistakable when you reach it. The results are so substantial that hiding them becomes harder than sharing them. The work has reached a level where it demands to be seen, where keeping it private would actually be a disservice to what you have created. This is the point where silence has done its job, where accumulation has occurred, where the container has built sufficient pressure. Now you release, not because you need validation, because the results warrant visibility. Most people never reach this point. They release too early. They share too soon. They announce intentions that never become results. They perform progress instead of accumulating it. And they spend their lives creating noise instead of signal, announcing instead of achieving, sharing instead of building. The pattern continues because they never learn to silence, never develop the discipline to contain, never discover what becomes possible when progress is protected until it screams. You have been releasing too early. You have been sharing too soon. You have been making noise when you should have been building signal. But now you understand the cost. Now you see what premature announcement has been stealing from you. Now you have the awareness to make a different choice. Silence your progress. Let build. Let it accumulate. Let the pressure increase until what you are building becomes undeniable. Then let results speak. They are louder than anything you can announce. They are more convincing than any intention you could share. They are the signal that cuts through all noise. Build until you have results that scream. Then you will not need to announce anything. The results will do the announcing for you. You learn to silence your progress until it screams. You understand the cost of premature announcement. You understand the power of strategic silence. But silence is not just about individual goals. Silence is about the entire process of building something significant. Your empire, whatever form it takes, must be constructed in private before it can stand in public. Chapter 8. Build your empire in private. You want people to see you building. You want the audience watching as you lay each brick. You want the recognition that comes from visible construction. But this desire is preventing you from building anything significant. Because empires are not built in public. Empires are built in private, in the dark, in the unseen hours and unwitnessed years where real construction happens. What you see publicly is always the result of what happened privately. The visible success is always the product of invisible work. And you have been trying to build in public, wondering why nothing substantial ever emerges. Here is what you need to understand. Every empire visible today was constructed through invisible phases. Years of private work, decades of unseen development, foundations laid when no one was watching, structures erected when no one was acknowledging. The public emergence was not the building. The public emergence was the reveal. The building happened long before, in silence, in darkness, in the private space where real construction occurs without the interference of external observation. That is the key. Empires are built in the dark and revealed in the light. This sequence is not optional. This sequence is required. You cannot build and reveal simultaneously. The building requires conditions that revealing destroys. The focus required for construction is shattered by the attention required for display. The depth required for foundation laying is prevented by the surface performance that visibility demands. You must choose: build in private or perform in public. You cannot do both effectively. Think about any significant achievement you admire, any business that dominates its market, any creator whose work has lasting impact, any person whose success seems remarkable. Now consider what you did not see: the years before anyone knew their name, the work before anyone noticed their effort, the building before anyone acknowledged their construction. You're seeing the reveal. You're not seeing the building that made the reveal possible. And this selective visibility creates a dangerous illusion. The illusion that success happens in public, that building happens in the light, that empires emerge from visible effort. You have a choice: continue trying to build in public and continue producing nothing substantial, or embrace private construction and discover what becomes possible when building happens in conditions that actually support building. One path feels connected, social, witnessed, but it produces structures that never exceed the foundations. The other path feels isolated, invisible, dark, but it produces empires that eventually emerge into undeniable visibility. Here is why privacy protects progress. When you build publicly, you invite interference at every stage. Critics who have opinions about your foundation before you have finished laying it. Competitors who see your direction and adjust their strategies accordingly. Well-meaning advisors who suggest modifications to blueprints you have not completed. Audiences who demand entertainment from a process that requires focus. Every external eye that sees your construction is an eye that can influence it. And influence during building is rarely helpful. Consider the entrepreneur who builds in public. Every product decision is visible. Every pivot is observed. Every struggle is witnessed. This visibility feels transparent, feels authentic, feels like the right way to build in the modern era. But the visibility extracts costs. Competitors copy innovations before they can create advantage. Critics undermine confidence before products are ready. Audiences create pressure to launch before quality is achieved. The building is compromised by the visibility that seemed so valuable. Now, consider the entrepreneur who builds in private. No one sees the iterations. No one observes the pivots. No one witnesses the struggles. This invisibility feels isolating, feels old-fashioned, feels like hiding when transparency is expected. But the invisibility provides protection. Competitors cannot copy what they cannot see. Critics cannot undermine what they do not know exists. Audiences cannot pressure what they are not aware of. The building proceeds according to internal standards, according to the builder's vision, according to what the construction actually requires. That is the key. Privacy protects your construction from interference you did not invite and cannot control. The protection is not paranoia. The protection is practical. The building requires conditions that visibility destroys. And refusing to protect those conditions is refusing to build anything substantial. It is not about hiding forever. It is not about never revealing what you have built. It is about protecting the construction phase until construction is complete, until the structure is strong enough to withstand exposure, until what you have built can survive the scrutiny, the criticism, the interference that visibility brings. The reveal comes, but the reveal comes after the building, not during it. Here is what building in private actually looks like. You wake up each day to work on something no one knows about. You solve problems no one will ever see you solving. You develop capabilities no one will ever witness you developing. You construct foundations no one will ever observe you laying. The work is entirely invisible. The progress is entirely private. The building is entirely between you and what you are creating. This feels lonely. This feels disconnected from the social world that seems to reward constant visibility. This feels like you're falling behind while others post their progress and receive recognition you are not receiving. But the feeling is deceptive. While they're posting, you're building. While they're performing construction, you're actually constructing. While they're seeking recognition for work in progress, you're doing the work that will eventually make recognition inevitable. The loneliness is the price. The disconnection is the cost. But the payment purchases something the visible builders can never purchase: depth, focus, protection. The conditions required for building something that actually lasts, something that actually matters, something that actually qualifies as an empire rather than a facade. You have a choice. Pay the price of private building and construct something substantial, or avoid the price through public building and construct nothing that survives scrutiny. The visible builders feel more connected, feel more validated, feel more like they are part of the current moment. But their buildings are compromised. Their structures are shallow. Their empires are facades that collapse when examined closely. The invisible builder feels isolated, feels unvalidated, feels disconnected from the social reward system. But their buildings are solid. Their structures are deep. Their empires are real. Here is the protocol for private construction. First, tell no one what you're building. This is absolute. Not your closest friends. Not your family. Not anyone. The moment anyone knows, privacy is compromised. The moment anyone is watching, even supportively, the conditions change. Complete privacy requires complete containment. No leaks, no hints, no sharing of direction. Just the building and the builder. Second, remove all performance from the process. When you work in private, there is no one to perform for, no one to impress with your dedication, no one to demonstrate your work ethic to. The performance instincts must be eliminated. They serve no purpose in private construction. They only distract from the building itself. Work as if no one will ever know how hard you worked, because in private construction, no one ever will. Third, extend the private phase longer than feels comfortable. Your instinct will be to reveal too early, to emerge too soon, to show what you're building before the building is complete. Resist this instinct. It is the same announcement addiction that has sabotaged your goals before. It is the same need for recognition that has leaked your energy. Extend privacy beyond your comfort. The discomfort is evidence that you are building something worth protecting. Consider the transformation that private building enables. When no one is watching, you can fail freely. Experiment without consequence. Pursue directions that might not work. Take risks that public building would never allow. The privacy creates a laboratory, a space for genuine development, a container where the messy process of real creation can occur without being curated for external consumption. That is the key. Private building allows experimentation that public building prevents, the failures that teach, the dead ends that inform, the iterations that eventually produce something valuable. All of this requires privacy, requires the safety to fail without being seen failing, requires the space to struggle without being observed struggling. Public building demands constant success performance. Private building allows the actual process of creation. Here is what happens when you trust the private process. First, you build according to your vision, not according to what audiences respond to. Not according to what critics approve of, not according to what competitors are doing. Your vision, your standards, your sense of what the building should become. This alignment between vision and construction produces something authentic, something that could not have emerged from public building, because public building always compromises vision for reception. Second, you develop capabilities invisibly. The skills you build while building are yours. Unannounced, unobserved, available to deploy when the reveal comes but unknown until then. This capability development is often more valuable than the specific construction. The person you become through private building is someone the public builder can never become, because the public builder is always performing capability instead of developing it. Third, you emerge with something undeniable. The private phase ends when the construction is complete, when what you have built speaks for itself, when the empire you have constructed is so substantial that it demands attention rather than requesting it. This emergence is different from the public builder's constant request for recognition. This emergence is earned, inevitable, the natural result of building something so significant that visibility becomes unavoidable. Consider the contrast between public and private building. The public builder has many starts and few completions, many announcements and few deliveries, many moments of recognition and few lasting achievements. Their visibility consumed the energy that building would have required. Their performance replaced the construction that results would have demanded. The private builder has few announcements and many completions, few moments of premature recognition and many lasting achievements. Their invisibility protected the energy that building required. Their silence enabled the construction that results demanded. When they finally emerge, they emerge with something real, something substantial, something that justifies the isolation they endured. You have been building in public, announcing starts, performing construction, seeking recognition for work in progress, and wondering why nothing substantial ever emerges. Nothing substantial emerges because substantial construction requires private conditions you have been refusing to create. The visibility you sought was the very thing preventing what you wanted to build. The choice is clear now. Continue as you have been, building in public, performing construction, emerging with nothing. Or embrace the dark. Build in private. Protect your construction from the interference of premature visibility. Emerge only when what you have built demands emergence. The empire you want to create is possible, but only if you are willing to build it where empires are actually built. In the dark, in private, in the unseen space where real construction occurs. You learn to build your empire in private. You understand why visibility compromises construction. You understand the protection that privacy provides. But private building requires something most people cannot sustain: persistence without applause, the ability to continue when no one is clapping, when no one is acknowledging, when the only motivation is internal. Chapter 9. Outlast everyone who needs applause. Most people quit when the applause stops, when the recognition fades, when the audience loses interest and moves on to the next person, the next project, the next thing that captures attention. This is the moment that separates those who build something lasting from those who merely perform for a while. The moment the applause disappears. In that silence, most people stop. They needed the clapping to continue. They required the acknowledgement to persist. And when it was gone, so was their effort. But you do not have to be most people. You can be the one who continues, the one who outlasts everyone who needs applause. And in that outlasting, you inherit everything they abandoned. Here is what you need to understand. Persistence without applause is the ultimate competitive advantage. Not talent, not resources, not connections. Persistence when no one is clapping. This is what separates the successful from the merely ambitious. The ambitious start with enthusiasm. They work hard when recognition flows. They persist while audiences watch. But when the applause fades, the ambitious fade with it. They needed external fuel. And when the fuel was cut off, they stopped moving. That is the key. The person who can continue without applause cannot be outcompete by people who require it. This is mathematics. The applause-dependent person will stop when applause stops. You will not stop. Therefore, you will pass them. You will outlast them. You will still be building when they have long since abandoned. and the territory they vacated becomes yours. Not because you were more talented, because you were more persistent, not because you worked harder in any single moment, because you worked longer across all moments, because you did not need what they needed, because their dependency was their weakness and your independence was your strength. Think about any field you want to succeed in. How many people started in that field with talent and enthusiasm? Thousands, perhaps millions. How many are still working at it 5 years later? A small fraction. How many are still working at it 10 years later? Smaller still. How many are still working at it 20 years later? A tiny remnant. The attrition is not from lack of ability. The attrition is from lack of persistence, from the exhaustion of working without recognition, from the depletion of effort without applause. The people who remain after 20 years are not necessarily the most gifted. They are the ones who did not need applause to continue. You have a choice. Be one of the many who quit when recognition fades, or be one of the few who continue regardless. One path places you in competition with everyone. The other path places you in competition only with those who share your persistence. One path means fighting for scraps with the masses. The other path means eventually standing in fields emptied by the attrition of applause-dependent competitors. Here is how long others last without recognition. Research into creative pursuits shows that most people abandon efforts within months if recognition does not arrive. Bloggers who quit after no one reads their posts. Musicians who stop after no one streams their songs. Entrepreneurs who abandon projects that do not generate immediate traction. The timeline is remarkably short. A few months without applause, and most people conclude the effort is not working. They interpret absence of recognition as evidence of failure rather than evidence of early-stage building. Consider what this means strategically. If most people quit within months without recognition, then persisting for years without recognition places you in an extraordinarily small group. The competition thins dramatically with each month you continue. The field empties progressively as applause-dependent competitors fall away. By year 2, most of your original competition has quit. By year 5, nearly all of them have. By year 10, you occupy territory that was once crowded but is now nearly empty. Not because you eliminated competitors, because they eliminated themselves through applause dependency. That is the key. Time without applause is a filter that removes everyone who needs external recognition to continue. You can pass through this filter simply by continuing, simply by not needing what most people need, simply by persisting when persistence is all you have. The filter does the work. You just have to survive it. It is not about enjoying the absence of applause. It is not about pretending recognition does not matter. It is about being able to function without it, about having internal fuel sufficient for the journey, about not being stopped by the same condition that stops nearly everyone else. You can want applause while not needing it. You can appreciate recognition while not requiring it. The distinction is operational. Can you continue without it? Yes or no? That answer determines whether you pass through the filter or get caught by it. Here is the protocol for building applause-independent persistence. First, develop internal motivation systems that replace external recognition. You need fuel. Everyone needs fuel. The question is where the fuel comes from. External fuel is applause, recognition, acknowledgement from others. Internal fuel is purpose, progress tracking, personal standards, intrinsic satisfaction from the work itself. You must develop internal fuel sources that do not depend on external provision. Purpose provides fuel when applause does not. Why are you doing this? Not for recognition. For what? The answer must be compelling enough to sustain effort indefinitely. Compelling enough to continue when no one is watching, acknowledging, or applauding. If your purpose is insufficient, you will not outlast the applause dependent. You will join them in quitting when recognition fades. Progress tracking provides fuel when applause does not. You may not receive external acknowledgement of advancement, but you can create internal acknowledgement. Metrics you track, milestones you mark, evidence you accumulate that progress is occurring. This internal tracking replaces the external validation that is not arriving. It tells you that you are advancing even when no one else notices or confirms. Personal standards provide fuel when applause does not. You know when your work meets your standards. You know when you have given genuine effort. You know when you have produced something you can respect. This internal assessment replaces external assessment. It provides the satisfaction of quality met even when no external voice confirms the quality. You have a choice. Develop these internal fuel sources deliberately or remain dependent on external fuel that may never arrive consistently. One path requires work, requires building systems that most people never build, requires developing capabilities that most people never develop. The other path is easier initially, but leads to certain failure when applause inevitably fades. Here is what happens when you outlast the applause dependent. First, you inherit their abandoned territory, the audience they built and then abandoned, the market position they established and then vacated, the momentum they created and then surrendered. All of it becomes available to whoever remains. And whoever remains is whoever did not need applause to continue. That can be you if you choose to build the capability. Second, you develop capabilities they never developed. The person who persists without applause builds internal resources the applause dependent never builds. Resilience that recognition seekers never develop. Self-reliance that validation addicts never cultivate. Depth that surface performers never achieve. These capabilities become permanent advantages. They compound over time. They separate you increasingly from those who remain dependent on external fuel. Third, you eventually receive the recognition that persistence earns. This seems paradoxical. You outlast the applause dependent by not needing applause. And then often applause arrives. Because persistence produces results. Because results eventually generate recognition. Because the person who continues long enough creates something undeniable. The recognition arrives not because you sought it, but because you earned it through the persistence that seeking recognition would have prevented. That is the key. Recognition often arrives for those who did not need it, and fails to arrive for those who did. The neediness repels what it seeks. The independence attracts what it does not require. The applause-dependent person, desperately seeking recognition, produces work shaped by that desperation. Work that audiences sense and reject. The applause-independent person, focused on the work itself, produces something authentic. Something audiences eventually recognize and reward. Consider the creator who persisted for years without significant recognition. They continued because they loved the work. They continued because internal standards were being met. They continued because purpose sustained them when applause did not. Year after year, producing in obscurity. And then something shifted. The work accumulated to a critical mass. The audience discovered what had been building. The recognition arrived in a flood. Not because they finally figured out how to get attention. Because they finally accumulated enough substance that attention became inevitable. This story repeats across every domain. The overnight success who worked for decades. The sudden breakthrough that followed years of invisible effort. The recognition that arrived not when it was sought, but when it was earned through persistence that seeking would have prevented. The applause-dependent people quit before reaching this point. They needed fuel that was not arriving. They could not persist long enough for the persistence to pay off. And so they never experienced what the persistent eventually experience. You have a choice. Be the person who quits before persistence pays off, or be the person who persists until it does. The first group is large, crowded with everyone who needed applause and did not receive enough of it. The second group is small, populated only by those who found a way to continue without external fuel. Join the second group, not because success is guaranteed, but because failure is guaranteed in the first group. Because the first group quits by definition. Because only the second group stays long enough for success to become possible. Here is the truth about applause. It is unreliable. It arrives unpredictably. It fades inexplicably. It goes to people who do not deserve it and avoids people who do. Building your persistence on something this unreliable is building on sand. The applause-dependent person is at the mercy of forces they cannot control or predict. The applause-independent person is at the mercy of nothing. They generate their own fuel. They continue regardless of external conditions. They persist not because conditions support persistence, but because they have made persistence independent of conditions. The competition is not who can work hardest when applause is flowing. Everyone can work hard when recognition rewards effort. The competition is who can work when applause has stopped entirely, who can continue in complete silence, who can persist when no one is watching, acknowledging, or caring. That competition has few entrants. Most people disqualify themselves. They cannot tolerate the conditions. They need the applause too much. And so the few who can tolerate the conditions win not by being better, but by being more persistent, by outlasting, by continuing when everyone else stopped. You can be one of the few. You can build the internal systems that provide fuel when external fuel is absent. You can develop the persistence that survives the silence. You can outlast everyone who needs applause. And in that outlasting, you can inherit everything they abandoned, every position they vacated, every opportunity they surrendered, every result they would have achieved if only they could have continued a little longer. The applause may never come. You must make peace with that possibility. You must be able to continue indefinitely without external recognition. But often, for those who achieve this independence, the applause eventually arrives. Not because they sought it, because they persisted long enough for results to demand it, because they continued until what they built became undeniable, because they outlasted everyone who needed applause and inherited the recognition those people would have received if only they had been able to continue. You learn to outlast everyone who needs applause. You understand the competitive advantage of persistence without recognition. You understand how to build internal fuel systems. But all of this learning, all of this building in the dark, all of this persistence without applause leads somewhere. It leads to emergence, to the moment when you step from darkness into light, transformed by what the darkness built in you. Chapter 10. Emerge from the dark transformed. You have been building in the dark, working without witnesses, persisting without applause, accumulating without announcement. And now something has shifted. The work has reached a point where it speaks for itself. The construction has achieved a substance that demands visibility. The effort has compounded into results that cannot remain hidden. The emergence is coming. Not because you seek recognition, because what you have built can no longer be contained. But here is what you must understand. You are not emerging as the same person who entered the dark. The dark changed you. The dark built something in you that the light never could. You are emerging transformed. And that transformation is more valuable than anything you constructed. Here is what you need to understand. Working in the dark changes you in ways that visible work cannot. The person who can persist without applause develops capacities the applause-dependent never develops. The person who can build without witnesses builds internal resources the witnessed builder never builds. The person who can sustain effort without recognition becomes someone fundamentally different from the person who requires constant validation. The dark is not just where you build external things. The dark is where you're built internally. That is the key. The dark builds what the light cannot. The light builds performers. The dark builds producers. The light builds people who can function when conditions are favorable. The dark builds people who can function regardless of conditions. The light builds fragile structures dependent on external support. The dark builds solid foundations that need nothing external to stand. You entered the dark one person. You are emerging another. And that other person is capable of things the first person could never have accomplished. Think about what the dark required of you. It required you to generate your own motivation when external motivation was absent. It required you to validate your own work when external validation was not available. It required you to persist without the fuel of recognition. It required you to build without the acknowledgement of building. Every requirement was a demand, and every demand you met was a development, a capability forged, a muscle built, a capacity created that did not exist before you entered the dark. You have a choice. Recognize the transformation and carry it forward, or dismiss what the dark built and return to dependency now that emergence is possible. One path honors what you have become, uses the capabilities the dark developed, maintains the independence the silence created. The other path wastes the transformation, returns to needing what you learned to live without, surrenders the advantage the dark provided. The emergence is not just about showing what you built. The emergence is about being who you became. Here is what the darkness developed in you. First, self-reliance. You learned to function without external support, to generate your own fuel, to provide your own validation, to sustain your own effort. This self-reliance is not something you practice temporarily. This self-reliance is now part of who you are, a capability you possess permanently, a foundation that will support everything you do from this point forward. The self-reliance does not disappear when you emerge into light. The self-reliance remains available, reliable, yours. Second, depth. While others were performing on surfaces, you were building in depths. While others were seeking attention, you were developing substance. While others were announcing beginnings, you were achieving completions. This depth distinguishes you. This depth is visible in what you produce. This depth cannot be faked by those who never entered the dark. They can only go as deep as their visibility addiction allows. You can go as deep as the work requires. That difference matters. That difference shows. Third, resilience. The dark tested you. The silence challenged you. The absence of applause created pressure you had to withstand, and you withstood it. That withstanding built resilience, capacity to endure what would break others, ability to continue when continuation seems impossible, strength that only comes from having been tested and having survived. This resilience is yours now, forged in darkness, available in light, ready for whatever challenges emergence brings. That is the key. You are not emerging with just results. You are emerging with capabilities. Capabilities the dark developed. Capabilities that remain with you regardless of what happens next. The results can be taken. The capabilities cannot. The results can be criticized. The capabilities cannot be diminished. What the dark built in you is permanent. What the dark built in you is yours. It is not about dismissing results. Results matter. What you built matters. But what you became while building matters more. Because results are singular. They exist, and then they're assessed, and then attention moves on. But capabilities are ongoing. They produce results indefinitely. They compound across everything you do. The person you became in the dark will produce results for the rest of your life. That person is the true product of the darkness. That person is what emergence actually reveals. Here is when to emerge, not when you crave recognition. The craving is the old addiction reasserting itself, not when you need validation. The need is the old dependency trying to return, not when silence becomes unbearable. The unbearability is weakness seeking escape. You emerge when results warrant it. When what you have built has reached a point where visibility serves it rather than serving your need to be seen. This is an assessment, not a feeling. Has the construction reached a level where exposure helps rather than harms? Has the work achieved a substance that survives scrutiny? Has the building completed to a degree where showing it demonstrates something rather than just seeking something? The signals of readiness are specific. The work stands on its own. It does not require explanation or defense. It does not need you to advocate for it. It speaks. Others can see what it is without you telling them what to see. This independence of the work from your promotion of it signals readiness. The work has its own voice now. Your voice is no longer required to give it significance. Another signal is that hiding becomes harder than showing. When the work has reached sufficient substance, containing it actually requires effort. The results want to be seen. The construction wants to be known. Not because you need recognition, because what you built has reached a point where its existence naturally creates visibility. You are not pushing for emergence. Emergence is pulling you. You have a choice. Emerge prematurely because you cannot tolerate more darkness. Or emerge strategically because results have reached the point where emergence serves them. One choice is weakness. The other choice is wisdom. One choice squanders what the dark built. The other choice honors it. The timing of emergence matters. Emerge too early and you undo the benefits of building in private. Emerge at the right moment and you maximize what the darkness protected. Here is what emergence looks like when done correctly. It is not announcement. It is not broadcast. It is not performance. Correct emergence is simply allowing what you have built to be seen, removing the privacy that protected it during construction, letting light fall on what was constructed in dark. The work speaks for itself. You do not need to speak for it. The results are evident. You do not need to explain them. The substance is undeniable. You do not need to convince anyone of anything. Consider the contrast with premature emergence. Premature emergence requires advocacy, explanation, defense. You must tell people why what you are showing matters because what you are showing does not yet speak for itself. You must convince because the work does not yet compel. You must promote because the results do not yet self-promote. This exhausting advocacy is evidence that emergence was premature, that more time in the dark was required, that the construction was not yet complete. Correct emergence requires none of this. The work compels without you compelling on its behalf. The results speak without you speaking for them. The construction is evident without you explaining what was constructed. You simply make visible what was invisible. The visibility does the rest. That is the key. Let results speak. They are louder than you are. When results have reached sufficient substance, your voice becomes unnecessary. The results do the communication. The results make the case. The results convince. Your job is not to announce what you built. Your job is to build something that announces itself. Something that, when revealed, speaks with a volume no announcement could match. Here is what you carry from darkness into light. You carry the capability to return to darkness whenever necessary. The light is not a permanent destination. The light is a phase. And after the light, more darkness will be required. More private building. More silent construction. More unseen effort. The person who emerged from darkness once can enter darkness again. The person who built without applause once can build without applause again. The skills are permanent. The capabilities are portable. The transformation is yours. You also carry immunity to light addiction. You know now that the light is not necessary for building. You know that visibility is not required for progress. You know that applause is optional rather than essential. This knowledge protects you from becoming dependent on the light, from needing the recognition you are now receiving. from becoming one of those people who emerge once, become addicted to visibility, and can never return to the productive darkness. You can return because you know what the darkness provides, because you value what the darkness builds, because you understand that the light is for revealing what darkness constructed, not for constructing. Consider what this means for your future. You are not limited to one emergence. You are not restricted to building one thing in the dark and then living in the light forever. You can cycle, build in darkness, emerge when ready, return to darkness to build again, emerge when that construction is ready. The pattern continues indefinitely. Each cycle produces results. Each cycle develops capabilities. Each cycle reinforces the transformation that the first darkness initiated. Most people cannot do this. Most people emerge once and become addicted to the light. They cannot return to darkness. They cannot give up the recognition. They cannot tolerate the silence after experiencing the applause. And so they stop building. They stop developing. They stop producing anything of substance because substance requires darkness they can no longer tolerate. Their emergence becomes their end rather than their beginning. You have a choice. Let emergence be an end, or let emergence be a beginning. Let the light become a trap, or let the light be a temporary phase. Let recognition become a dependency, or let recognition remain something you can appreciate without requiring. The transformation the darkness built in you makes this choice possible. The capabilities the silence developed make this choice available. But you must still choose. Here is the final truth. The person who can operate in the dark is the most powerful person in any room. They cannot be stopped by withholding recognition. They cannot be controlled through offering or denying applause. They cannot be manipulated through the approval and disapproval that controls everyone else. They have an internal engine. They have private fuel. They have capabilities the light-dependent cannot match. You have become that person. Through the darkness you endured, through the silence you tolerated, through the persistence you sustained. The transformation is complete. The emergence is earned. What you build in the dark is ready to stand in the light. And more importantly, who you became in the dark is ready to function in any conditions. Light or dark, public or private, witnessed or unseen. The dark was not deprivation. The dark was development. The dark was not punishment. The dark was preparation. The dark was not emptiness. The dark was the space where everything meaningful was built, where you were built, where the person now emerging was forged. You understand now why operating in the dark is power, why building without witnesses is advantage, why persisting without applause is competitive superiority. You understand because you have done it. You have lived it. You have been transformed by it. The emergence happens now, not because you need to be seen, because what you build deserves to be seen, not because you crave applause, because what you created earns applause without craving it, not because you seek validation, because what you produced validates itself. Step into the light. Carry what the darkness taught you. Know that you can return whenever necessary. Know that the darkness will always be available. Know that what you built there and who you became there is permanent. The dark builds what the light cannot. You are the proof. Emerge transformed, and never forget where the transformation happened. In the silence, in the invisibility, in the dark where no one was watching and you built anyway. That is where power comes from. That is where you came from. That is who you are now. Someone who operates in the dark and emerges unstoppable. You have learned 10 truths about operating in the dark. You have learned that the spotlight is a trap that kills results while feeding the ego. That no one owes you applause for your efforts. That your best work requires a silence that most people cannot tolerate. That validation is an addiction you must break free from in order to achieve anything meaningful. That invisible effort has as powerful an impact as celebrated effort. That your need for witnesses must be eliminated. That progress must be silenced until results shout. That empires are built in private before they appear in public. That outlasting those who need applause is the ultimate competitive advantage. And that darkness transforms you in ways light never could. But here's what really matters. Will you implement or just understand? Will you truly operate in the dark or continue seeking the spotlight? Will you build in silence or publicize every beginning? Will you persist without applause or give up when recognition disappears? Tomorrow you have work to do. Work that no one will see. Work that no one will recognize. Work that no one will validate. And how you approach that work determines everything. Will you do it anyway? Will you give it your all, even without an audience? Will you build in the dark because building is more important than being seen building? People who succeed aren't smarter or more talented than you. They're simply willing to work when no one is watching, willing to persist when no one is applauding, willing to build in the dark while others wait.